Hey guys, what's up? My name's Chopper, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new video. So, about a month ago, we talked about the top 10 worst iron sights in PUBG, and so today, we're going to be flipping that idea on its head, because you guys absolutely loved that, and we're going to be looking at the top 10 best iron sights in this game. So, once again, as I did for the previous video, I went through every gun in the game and looked at their iron sights, and made a decision on myself about which ones I think that are generally considered to be the best, and then I picked out the top 10 and put them in a list, and that's what we're going to be going over today. So, if you guys end up enjoying the video, I would really appreciate if you could spare a second to drop a thumbs up. That would be absolutely incredible. And of course, make sure you do subscribe if you are branded to the channel if you haven't already. And with that being said, let's get into these top 10 best iron sights in PUBG. Now for this list, it is kind of hard to rank each iron sight in the sequential like 1 to 10 order based on each other. So pretty much I just put them in a top 10 list, and I tried to rank them generally on how good I think their iron sights are compared to all of the other good ones. So it is a pretty difficult contest here. So starting it off here and coming in today at our number 10 spot is going to be the Scar L. Now this already might trigger some of you guys because a lot of the comments on the top 10 worst iron sights, people were saying that why isn't the Scar L on this list? Apparently to a lot of players, these are some of the worst iron sights in the game, but I honestly just don't agree. I don't mind the iron sights on the Scar L at all. In fact, I think they're pretty good if you can single shot with them. I think the reason why people don't like it for the most part, I believe I figured it out, is because when you actually, use like a prolonged spray, if you're shooting more than 10 bullets, then the iron sight starts to get really shaky. Like, I'm talking pretty dramatically shaky. So I think like the Scar L iron sights just for single tapping or short burst really isn't as bad as people say, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. And by no means am I saying that you should use the iron sights like versus any sort of red dot or just any optic on the Scar L, but what I am saying is, like, all things considered, when you compare it to a lot of the other guns in the game, the Scar L really isn't that bad in hindsight, and I think it gets too much flack from you guys. And also, not to mention, it's just a solid gun as well, so like just having maybe not the most optimal iron sights really isn't that bad at the end of the day. But getting away from that, moving on to our number 9 spot, this gun has got to be the UMP. Now, it can be either the UMP9 or UMP45. As far as I'm aware, there's no difference in the iron sights between these two. The only like gun model difference that I can tell was the magazine. Now it's like a straight mag instead of a curved one that the UMP9 used to have. But regardless, the iron sights on this just honestly are probably some of the cleanest in the game. What determines a good iron sight, in my opinion, or just the criteria that I'm using to rank these for the most part, is just like the actual cleanliness and the visibility of the centerpiece, and then also like the bulkiness around the centerpiece, which is really important because some of the bulkiness makes it a lot harder to track targets than you really realize. You could have the cleanest centerpiece in the world on your weapon, but if it's so bulky around the edges, then you're not going to be able to see if your target's moving at all. Then perhaps those iron sights may not be as good as you think, but the advantage that the UMP has is that the centerpiece is absolutely perfect on it pretty much, and then there's really no bulkiness around the edges, and it's super easy to track targets and see out of, so it's great. I have no complaints with the UMP. Only downside is that it really has nothing to do with the iron sights, but the weapon just isn't the strongest thing in the world, so you really got to make sure you can track targets with it, but thankfully the iron sights are pretty decent. But coming in at the number 8 spot is going to be the AUG A3, and the thing is, like, all of these 5.56 ARs, like, you'll notice all have like pretty good or at least usable iron sights, and this is like textbook of how I would like an iron sight to be designed on most of the weapons. Like, the centerpiece is super easy to use, there's not a lot going around the edges, and it's very, very clean around so you can track your targets properly. Although there is one odd thing about this weapon in particular when using the irons, or pretty much just shooting with any sight whatsoever, the weapon shakes a lot, and so it makes the iron sights feel much worse than they really are. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if it's like a placebo effect or if it's just me. You guys can let me know if you feel this as well, but like compared to some of the other AR sprays, the AUG feels like super unsteady, and I think if you're trying to use the irons for whatever reason on this, then it's going to feel extra awful. But of course, this won't happen too often because if you're playing the game enough to get an AUG either out of crates or you pick it off somebody else, then odds are you're going to have another kind of scope. Like, you're not going to be forced to use irons pretty much ever on this unless you only chase drops, you don't loot it all for some reason. I don't know why you would do that, but hey, if that's your thing. Okay guys, coming in at the number 7 spot, I'm going to throw it over to an SMG. I'm going to give this one to the Vector, and I think a lot of you guys are going to agree with me that there's a lot that goes into determining if an iron sight is good or not, rather than just the design itself. And I think like a lot of it has to do with also muzzle flash, which is a very underrated feature of determining, the usefulness of iron sights and the viability of it. And thankfully the Vector has absolutely no muzzle flash for the most part. And especially considering how ridiculously high the Vector's fire rate is, then if you had any muzzle flash at all, like, good luck. You're not hitting anything. And to be honest with you, I think I use these iron sights maybe more than a couple of sights on this in the game. Like, I really don't like the hollow on the Vector for whatever reason. It just doesn't fit right with me, and so I'd rather use the irons than that for the most part. When it comes to a red dot, I'm obviously going to take that, but generally speaking, for most players, and especially the fans of the Vector, number one, it's a good weapon. It also has great iron sights, so really no downsides here, and I think it absolutely deserves to be one of these top tier. But moving away from that and coming in today at the number 6 spot, I'm going to give this one to the Kar 98K. And I know that's going to sound kind of weird at first, but let me explain. No, I'm not trying to make the case that I think the K9 has better iron sights than a lot of the weapons on this list, because it just simply doesn't, right? It's an old designed weapon, and the iron sights just aren't the cleanest thing in the world. But that's okay, because comparatively to the other sniper rifles, this is absolutely the best. When you compare it to like an AWM or an M24, and even like to some other like real weapons in the game that just aren't snipers, the K9 actually kind of holds its own. The biggest strength that the K9's iron sights have is that it doesn't have anything on the side railing going on, and it's not very obstructive, and the centerpiece is really easy to like pinpoint somebody's head. And again, I don't think I have to say it for this weapon, but just using iron sights on this gun is clearly not ideal, but if you're forced to use it or you just cannot find anything else, it's not like the worst thing in the world. In fact, I think if you put me and a lot of other people in a situation where you're given the choice of having either a K9 for the rest of the game or an AWM, but you can't have any sights on it, most players would pick the K9. They're really not too bad at all. But coming in at number 5, this is going to be my boy, the M416. And honestly, these iron sights are almost identical to the AUG. However, there's a little bit more going on around the edges with the M4. But the one thing that I like better about it is that it really doesn't have that awkward shakiness that I was describing earlier. And again, I don't know exactly what that is. I think it's just like a weird weapon steadiness issue. And I guess I just feel better using the M4, and it makes those iron sights feel better to me. But I don't feel uncomfortable at all if I'm forced to use these iron sights. I guess the only real downside to the M4 iron sights is it has a little bit of bulkiness on the side, but it's honestly manageable, and especially just because the centerpiece is so clean on this one that it's not a big deal. And also, a kind of weird one is that depending on the weapon skin, sometimes that can change the color of that centerpiece, and it makes it really hard to see up against certain backgrounds, and I've noticed that, and it's like with this weapon in particular, it can really affect it. Alright, coming at the number 4 spot, I think I want to give this one to the SLR. Now, like the iron sights on this one are pretty different as compared to like a lot of the other DMRs in the game, because the centerpiece on this is so pinpoint and there's like almost zero obstruction. Like if you think of the Mini 14 iron sights in comparison, it feels like the centerpiece on that one is like really bulky, and especially around the edges, it's like almost impossible to see. So the SLR, in my opinion, does it right. The only thing I think I could do without is like that front outer ring, but if it didn't have that, then just the front piece would be so incredibly easy to track people with. But what you got to keep in mind is that this, based on the weapon type, is not meant to be used in really any close range scenarios. So if you're not using it to its full advantage and using with a scope or at least a hollow sight, then you're using it wrong. But at the very least, what you can give it is that it's not the most uncomfortable thing in the world to use if you have nothing else at hand. All right, now finally getting into our top 3 here. This was really hard to choose, and again, like as I said at the beginning of the video, it's hard to rank these in sequential order, so these are probably going to shift around for me a little bit. But I think I want to give number 3 to none other than the M249. I know that's such a weird choice, and while you're looking at this, they're really not that pretty, especially around the edges, but just imagine all of the bulkiness on the sides are gone, and you only have that centerpiece. The thing is, I think this middle like part in this iron sight probably is the best in the game. I can't really think of anything else, but again, the downsides are because it's just like so obstructive on the edges. But aside from that, if you can ignore the edges, the centerpiece is basically the equivalent of a red dot sight. It might even be better than using a red dot, to be honest. It actually surprised me how good the middle part of this iron sight was, but it cannot be the best just because of the ridiculous amount of excess stuff it has on the edges. And just like the AUG, chances are next to none that you're going to run into an M249 and then not have previously ran into a sight before that. But moving on, and coming in today at the number 2 spot, guys, is going to be the G36C. Now, I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this one. The G36 performs really similarly to the Scar L as far as like its statistics, but this is the Vikendi version of the Scar if you want to think about it like that. But what I like better about the G36, and especially the iron sights, is that with the Scar L, when you spray a lot, like how you kind of lose sight of the centerpiece when it kicks, that doesn't happen with the G36. And even I'd say when you spray, it gets easier to see, which is weird. Now, it is safe to say that a lot of these 5.56 ARs all have like pretty similar iron sights with like small deviations separating the two. And like the thing is, like with the QBU compared to the G36, they are very similar in structure, but it's something about the way that it fires that I just prefer the G36 way more. And it also certainly helps its own case just due to the fact that it is a fantastic gun. Unfortunately, since it's only Vikendi, you might not get that much playtime with it. I'm hoping they move this gun to every map at least at some point, because it genuinely is one of my favorite guns in the game. But we'll have to wait and see on that and see if my wishes come true. But finally, guys, coming in today at the #1 spot, the best iron sights in the game, in my opinion, it's gonna have to be the MP5 SMG. And oh man, these iron sights I am absolutely in love with. Something about it is so steady when you're firing it that it's almost better than using a red dot. Now, the MP5, just like every weapon, isn't without its flaws, obviously. The back portion of it could be a little bit cleaner, but just the centerpiece that you have, and especially when you're spraying with it, how it comes into view better is absolutely unbeatable. And I feel like another big part of it is the fact that this might be the most steady weapon that we've talked about on this list, you know, arguably compared to some of the other SMGs. But the MP5, there's no doubt that it's slowly but surely becoming a fan favorite, and I'm hoping this one gets shipped to all of the maps so everybody gets a chance to play with it. But guys, that is going to be my list of the top 10 best iron sights in PUBG, and I want you to let me know in the comment section if there's any weapon that I missed that you feel like should be on this list. Let me know what that should be, because there's obviously a lot of really good contenders that I feel like could have definitely placed easily on here. So if you have one of those ones, let me know what that is down below in the comment section. If you want to check out my video of the top 10 worst iron sights and you want to see which ones place on that list, then feel free to check out that video as well. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this video today, and if you did, make sure to drop a like, rating, subscribe if you are brand new, and before you head out of here, make sure you check the link in the description and go check out my second channel. I'm uploading a lot more content over there pretty consistently, and I'd appreciate if your support on here. If you want to check that one out as well, that would mean the world to me. But thank you guys so much once again. You're absolutely the best. Love you guys, and I'll see you all in the next stream or the next video. Take it easy and peace out.